All right, today we're diving into a really profound and, let's be honest, pretty challenging text, the Testament of the Great Evening. Now, this isn't your typical philosophy. It's more like a final declaration. The whole idea is that the age of striving, that frantic search for meaning we're all familiar with, it's over. And our goal here is to really unpack what that means, on its own terms.
And the text just hits you with this right from the start. This isn't just a quiet moment, it's the end of the song. The argument here is that this silence isn't an absence of something, it's a presence. It's the one truth that remains when all the noise and clamor of history finally fades away.
So here's the kicker. The search for meaning didn't find an answer, it just burned out. The treatise argues that humanity's big cosmic why has basically run out of gas, and what's left behind isn't despair but a kind of exhausted peace. The books are closed.
And they call this state the Great Evening. The key here is that it's not meant to be some scary apocalypse. It's framed as a liberation. It's that moment you can finally, truly stop running. It's a release from what the text calls the constant, anxious fever of becoming.
Okay, so to even begin to understand this kind of peace, the treatise says we first have to do a little autopsy on all the ambitions that came before it. We need to diagnose the sickness of becoming and take apart the very ideas that kept us all running for so long.
Let's start with the big one, the will to power. The treatise just completely flips this on its head. It says, nope, this wasn't some noble, creative force. Instead, it was a will to distraction, basically a panicked sprint away from the sheer terror of silence and nothingness.
A perfect way to picture this is the parable of the clocksmith. Here's this guy, right? He builds this incredible cathedral of clocks, trying to master time itself. But what does he actually accomplish? He just ends up measuring how tired he's getting. He's not filling the void with meaning. He's just filling it with the loud ticking noise of his own exhaustion. And this is where things get really turned upside down. The overman, that ultimate ideal of humanity, is reframed as the biggest burden you could possibly carry, a glittering lie. But the so-called last men, the ones who just want comfort and tiny pleasures, well, the treatise says they're the ones with the quiet wisdom. They chose the hammock in the sun over the tightrope because they understood both just lead back to the same patch of dirt.
And what about that whole idea of self-overcoming? The treatise is absolutely brutal here. It gives us this incredible metaphor. It's like peeling an onion. You go through all this painful effort, you're crying, you're stripping away layers of who you are, only to get to the center and realize there's nothing there. Nothing but the knife that did all the cutting. Just a painful, empty act.
So, if that's the diagnosis, what does the journey look like? Well, it's not what you'd think. The treatise argues that the true path to wisdom isn't some heroic ascent up a mountain. It's a descent. It's a collapse into a weary but ultimately honest acceptance of things.
And this journey down has 3 stages. It starts with the stillborn child, where that creative spark, that innocence, just curdles into fatigue and dies before it even begins. Then you become the caged lion, where your roar of rebellion is just a scream into an empty room, trapped in a cage made of your own infinite choices. And finally, the spirit just gives up. It becomes the broken camel, carrying not some noble burden, but just the crushing weight of being tired.
This whole descent is captured perfectly in the parable of the gray mirror. Imagine a striver who climbs the highest mountain of self-improvement, determined to become a god. He gets to the summit, and what does he find? Not a throne, but a mirror. And when he looks into it, he doesn't see a god. He sees his own shadow, telling him his grand journey was just a long, circular walk to his own grave.
So you might be asking, how does the treatise even begin to prove such a bleak outlook? Well, it offers what it considers its central proof, and it's a parable. A story about a perfect machine that uses pure, flawless logic to arrive at one single conclusion: cessation.
So meet the brass owl. You can think of it as an artificial overman. It's a machine built for one purpose: to witness all of existence, to calculate everything, forever without ever getting tired. It's the absolute pinnacle of that ambition to know everything and endure anything.
But what does this perfect, tireless mind discover after observing all of time and space? It doesn't find some grand cosmic purpose. Instead, its flawless logic reveals a single devastating truth: that all of existence is just a frantic repetition of the circle, an endless, pointless loop that goes nowhere.
This perfect knowledge all boils down to one final, unanswerable question that the machine itself poses.
Having seen everything from beginning to end, it asks, if the first moment is identical to the last, and the final sum of everything is 0, why should I keep doing the math?
And in that moment, the brass owl just stops. It goes completely silent. The gears lock, the lights go dark, and it becomes this cold, metal monument. It's a testament to the idea that even perfect, eternal striving, when taken to its logical conclusion, decides the only wise answer is to just cease. Okay, so after tearing down all the old delusions and proving futility with its parable, the treatise then offers its new gospel. These are the core principles for how to live, knowing what we now know. And it's not about despair. The text actually frames this as a philosophy of deep, profound relief.
And there are 3 main ideas to this new way of being: the sovereign act of self-undergoing, the spiritual healing of the great refusal, and the final blessing, which it calls the happiness of the grave. So let's just quickly break down what each of those actually means.
First up, self-undergoing. This totally redefines what it means to be a hero. The text says true heroism isn't about climbing higher or fighting harder. The real hero is the one who has the wisdom to stop fighting and just embrace the fall. Becoming, it says, is a chore you're forced to do. Ceasing is a gift you give yourself.
Second, we have the great refusal. This is basically the final spiritual no. It's a rejection of the universe's demand that you participate, that you feel, that you strive. The treatise uses this amazing parable about the blood of St. Januarius. You know, the crowd prays for the miracle of the dried blood to become liquid and flow again. But the text says, no, the real miracle is the blood that refuses to flow, the blood that finds peace in simply being still.
And that brings us to the ultimate goal, the happiness of the grave. Now, this isn't meant to be morbid. It's presented as a state of absolute, perfect tranquility, the end of all wanting and all pain. And the metaphor for it is just beautiful. It's the holy peace of the broken clock that no longer has to lie about the time.
And so we come to the epilogue's final poetic argument. The sun, with its harsh light that demands growth and action, was a liar. But twilight offers a gentler, more honest light. It doesn't demand anything from you. And, crucially, the treatise argues it's not just a pit stop on the way to night.
And that is the thought this treatise ultimately leaves us with. It suggests that this twilight is the final, stable state for a world that has finally grown wise enough to be finished with it all. Which leaves us with that central, haunting question to think about. Is this twilight an ending we should mourn, or is it a destination we should welcome?